Namaste and greetings, and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymond Anderson, the founding minister and spiritual director. If you ever have questions about who I am, who we are, what we do, what is spiritually integrated arts, what is a teaching center, what is Centers for Spiritual Living, what is metaphysical spirituality, what is New Thought, Science of Mind and Spirit, how do I become a member? How can I support, tithe, and donate? All of these questions and so many more. Send an email. You have two options. SIAADMIN, Spiritually Integrated Arts, admin at spirituallyintegratederarts.org, or spirituallyintegratederarts@gmail.com. Either of those will work. You can also visit our website, www.spirituallyintegratederarts.org. Now, you may be wondering, where else can I find and follow? There are several other social media platforms that you can also subscribe and follow. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our YouTube channel, where you can also find all of our Sunday messages and more. I look forward to hearing from you soon. I look forward to you being a part of this beloved community. Because we are a virtual community, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. This can also be your spiritual community, because you can have more than one. Anywhere that you feel supported, anywhere you are spiritually fed is home, is community, is relationship. So I look forward to dialoguing more, conversing more, getting to know you. Much love and appreciation. Live long and prosper. Chat with you soon. Take care. Namaste and greetings, and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts. And today, July 16th, you have the opportunity to join us in the After Sunday Message Fellowship Hall, which is in Zoom. And if you don't already have the Zoom link, then see those two email addresses. Send an email to either of them requesting the link. You should probably do that right about now or soon, because as soon as I close the Sunday message and prayer, we typically head over to Zoom and start our fellowship, our conversation. And we recently had some pretty lively conversations about all kinds of stuff: gun violence, block parties, and just woo! Yes, we went all the way there. So make note, once again, those two email addresses, keep them, because they're going to be important for other things as well. So you ready? Because how do you keep up to date with what's going on with this teaching center? No, I mean, how do you know what we're doing? How do you know where to get information? You say you don't. Oh, okay. Well, then you might want to visit our website. You might want to like, follow, subscribe on all the various social media platforms that we're on: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the YouTube channel, which is important to be aware that all of our Sunday messages are archived on the YouTube channel. So if you ever miss a Sunday, if you want to share a Sunday with some friends or family, they're always there on the YouTube channel. So you don't need to search for them on Facebook. You don't need to search for them on Twitter. You don't need to search for them on TikTok. Well, we're not on TikTok anyway. YouTube channel. Also, how do you financially support, donate, tithe to this beloved community? You have these two QR codes that you can use. One is Givelify, the other is PayPal. If you'd like to send a check or a money order or some other method, remember those email addresses? Send an email and mention that that's what you would like, and either our secretary or our treasurer will get back to you so that you know how to donate in your preferred method. Now, once again, those email addresses are important because they also give you access to the Zoom links for our Wednesday night discussion group and our Thursday night study group. Both of these educational opportunities begin at 7 p.m. and end at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So once again, if you would like more information, if you would like the Zoom link, send an email. Now, if you are ready, standing on Shiva. Standing on Shiva. There is a Hindu story of a battle taking place between the gods and the demons. The demons, however, were winning, and the gods turned to Durga, known as the goddess of compassion and mothering, asking her to do something. So out of her forehead sprang the fierce warrior goddess Kali. Very similarly, in Greek mythology, Athena, goddess of war, sprang from the forehead of Zeus, fully grown and fully armored with weapons in hand. Kali proceeded to do what? To destroy the demons. However, in her frenzy, she also then began killing everyone else. Shiva, the destroyer of illusion, threw himself beneath her feet, allowing her to ground herself, to once again return to herself so that she would stop mindlessly killing everyone else. And this is precisely why it is important when we do battle with conditions, with experiences, with effect, with collective consciousness that is not life affirming. When we go to war against this, we can become lost in the egoic battle. We can spiral into the exact same warmongering consciousness that we sought to heal. We can forget our real and true purpose. But grounding, in this case, standing on Shiva, grounding and centering ourselves in principle and truth, brings us back to remembering, to reconnecting to who and what we are. Remember, we are not bound by principle. We're not bound by precedent. We are bound by principle. Remember that. We are not bound by precedent, events, circumstances, conditions. We are bound by principle, truth, love and law, life affirming mental equivalence. We are bound by that. And so we reground ourselves and remember ourselves and recollect to ourselves the truth of our being. Standing on Shiva. Breathe. So Durga allows Kali to spring forth. And Kali, in rage and frenzied obliteration of the demons, forgets herself, loses herself, becomes the very thing she is fighting against, the enemy. And so Shiva, destroyer of illusion, allows himself to be the grounding principle upon which Kali stood so that she would come back to herself, to remember, to reconnect, to realign, to remember her purpose. So, in this idea of Shiva, now granted, this is a Hindu mythology, Hindu spirituality, Hindu archetype, all of these things. But it offers us the opportunity to understand Shiva, he who is without beginning and end. Ooh, wait. Sounds like the absolute. Sounds like the absolute. He who is without beginning and without end, in the midst of confusion, the creator of all, of manifold form, the one embracer of the universe. By knowing him, one is released from all fetters. By knowing the absolute, the illusion is shed. That which is the one creates, because it is the infinite creator creating all that is. There is only one life, and that life is God, and that life is your life right now. So in this idea of Shiva, the god of destruction, yeah, no, it's easy for us to think, destruction? How is that a good thing? Well, Shiva literally means auspiciousness and welfare, the wellness and well-being of. Shiva is the third god of the Hindu triad and is the god of destruction and represents darkness, the mystery, the birthplace from which yin, the birthplace from which all creation flows. Now, in this idea of destruction, Shiva is destroying things like evil and ignorance and corruption and even the concept of death, the effect of death. Shiva brings us into this, or Shiva energy brings us into this infinite and immortal, eternal, ever expanding consciousness. That is our invitation with Shiva. Dr. Holmes offers us from the Science of Mind textbook. The whole of spirit is potentially focused in our individual objective consciousness. But we have not yet evolved to a realization of this, except in a slight degree. A slight degree, we understand that we are an individualized expression of the one, to a slight degree. Well, how do we stretch that so it's more and more and more? So rather than it being an hors d'oeuvre, it's actually a meal. It's actually greater sustenance, not just a taste, but it's greater sustenance because it is a full 8-course meal from start to finish with dessert and all the fixins. Not just in a slight degree. How do we expand this so that we understand who and what we truly are? Well, let's start with this realization that we already do this in this human, quote unquote, human form. We understand to a certain degree. So let's think mathematics. How many of us understand and know all that there is to know about math? Or we know the basic math and the computations that get us by to balance our checkbooks, to pay our bills, maybe to measure something, to build something in the backyard. We may know that. But we know math to a certain degree, except for those who are mathematicians who know it on a greater degree. We live in our individual houses and we know what's going on in our individual houses or individual house, but we're not aware of what's going on to the right, to the left, to the front, to the back of us. We are aware to a slight degree of what's going on in our neighborhood, But when we expand out, when we get to know neighbors and we visit, then we know in a greater degree. How many of us know the full encompassing allness of the planet? We know where we are or where we're going or where we've been. Do we know the languages of all these places? Written, spoken. Do we know the customs of all of these places? We know in a slight degree, except when we decide to be a world traveler or an ambassador of goodwill, then we learn more and expand. We know certain things about our own bodies, but when we become physicians, registered nurses, then we know more about. So it's no longer just a slight degree, even though doctors, physicians, nurses, they don't know everything, but they know more than just a slight degree because they have chosen to step into a degree of mastery of that. So, in many ways, we are like toddlers who are stumbling around and bumping into and learning how to use our bodies and manipulate things around us. But as we mature, as we grow, as we evolve, that slight degree becomes greater. Greater awareness of self, greater awareness of our surroundings, greater awareness of how to pick up a glass or move a pillow or feed ourselves, etc. See, we already do this in the physical realm of effects and conditions. Our invitation, based upon what we just read, is how do we expand this in the spiritual awareness so that we are moving beyond just a slight degree to a greater degree of awareness that you are the divine, you are the infinite I am, ever becoming more and more and more, not a slight degree, more and more and more. Tom Johnson says, we must practice the principle of living the presence of God. And time out. We must practice the principle of living the presence of God. We don't come into the presence of God, we're already there. And because we are it incarnating as us, we are the presence of God in this form that we refer to as human. So we must practice the principle of living as this, being in the presence of this, being surrounded by this. The very presence of God is all there is, ever present, everywhere, ever now, always. We must practice living that. And in so doing, we do not argue, criticize, or condemn someone else or even our own self. There's no need to argue, to criticize, to condemn ourselves or anyone else. Not when we're practicing the principle of living the presence of God. Arguing, not when we're practicing the principle of living the presence of God. Criticize, condemn, nope. Not self or others. Now, if you know me, then you know I'm very keen on reminding us of how words shift and the energy of words shift. So we're going to pause and we're going to take that word criticize for a moment and break it down with critique and criticism. Because oftentimes we think these mean the same thing and they don't. Criticism seeks to tear another person down or tear ourselves down, while critique seeks to help us or them to improve. Criticism focuses on the goals of the critic's ego, while critique is motivated by the intention to serve the goals of unity and compassion. Criticism is judgmental and focused on placing blame somewhere, while a critique is descriptive and focused on finding solutions. So when we are practicing living the presence of God, critique is fine because critique is life affirming, whereas criticism is not. Breathe. Because it's important in this practice for us to really understand what it is we're practicing, how we practice the presence. Dr. Holmes says, a practitioner of this science, science of mind and spirit, should not be confused over any given form, but should know that any form which is not of the original harmony is subject to change. So don't get confused over the effect. Don't get confused over the condition. But know that if it is not of the original harmony, it is subject to change. Everything is subject to change, technically, except for the infinite, which, in a relative sense, it changes as well. But that's a different Sunday message. So, as a practitioner, licensed or not, our invitation, because we're practicing science of mind and spirit, our invitation is to be very clear about form, effect, condition, first cause, the creative process, and once again, practicing living the presence of God. Because when we do that, then how we move through this thing called life, we do so with greater mastery, we do so with greater stewardship, life affirming stewardship, greater control. We are no longer at the whim of. So, just as a way of thinking about this, the practitioner does not get the shadow and the hand mixed up. They understand that the shadow is an effect caused by light shining on one side of the hand and casting a shadow. So they need not get confused and think, oh my goodness, there's a camel in. They know that it's not, it's a shadow. And it's not a shadow of a camel, it's a shadow of a hand. They understand what the form, what the effect, what the condition is. No confusion. They understand that when you see an ice sculpture of a dragon, it's not a dragon, it's a symbolic representation of a dragon carved into ice. Ice is water, water is H2O. They understand how to go back to first cause. H2O shows up as solid, liquid, and gas. In order to create an ice carving, I have to make sure that the H2O is in the solid form. In order for it to be in the solid form, it must be in a very low temperature, freezing. And once frozen, it can then be carved. They understand the process by which you create whatever that effect is. There is no confusion. There is no confusion and say, chocolate cake is chocolate cake. No, chocolate cake is created by having several different ingredients that are mixed in a specific manner that is then baked in a specific manner at a specific temperature for a specific length of time. They understand. And even beyond that, if there's flour, where did the flour come from? Trace it back. Where did the chocolate, the cocoa, come from? Trace it back. They understand first cause and how first cause comes into being this, which comes into being this, which comes into being this, which then creates chocolate cake. Same thing for the cell phone, your smartphone. They understand that this miniature computer doesn't exist in and of itself. It is made up of possibly hundreds of thousands of different pieces and parts and software for the purpose of making it usable to whomever has the phone. You take one thing out, the battery, it doesn't function. You take one thing out, the SIM card, the function changes. Delete several programs, several software, several apps, and things change. So the practitioner understands what software, what application, what apps are useful to the purpose of what I want to experience. Same thing for each and every one of us. No matter what it is, health and well-being, physical, emotional, psychological, our relationships, our finances, all of these can be traced back to first cause, principle. We are not bound by precedent. Principle. So if this is the effect that you want with your finances, robbing Peter to pay Paul, well, clearly whatever's going on is currently manifesting that. But if you want it to change, first cause. Now, understanding that your individual first cause, your individual mental equivalent, your individual process can change to a great deal. And you are in a mindset of a masterful concept of wealth and prosperity. But your employer still is not paying you anything above minimum wage. And it's not even a living minimum wage. But see, the practitioner understands it's not just about changing my own consciousness, it's also about the collective consciousness. So when I go back to shift my own consciousness to address what I am putting into the law of my own mind and consciousness, how I am open at the top and open at the bottom, I do the same thing regarding the collective. Because if I'm not doing it in totality, then I am living based upon a compartmentalized Tupperware spirituality. That's all about me having and doing. Well, that's privilege. And there can be life affirming privilege, and there can be non life affirming privilege. So the practitioner understands the process and the practice. And that is our invitation, licensed or not. That is our invitation to practice. Sally Kempton says, whether Kali seems terrifying, fascinating, or loving depends upon our state of consciousness and our level of both emotional and spiritual development. But she always invites us to a radical form of ego transcendence. So pause and breathe and take that in. How she appears is based upon our state of consciousness and our level. I mention that specifically because in the movie Jacob's Ladder, Danny Aiello plays a character by the name of Louis. And Louis tells Jacob, or the character, the main character, Eckhart saw hell too, he said. The only thing that burns in hell is the part of you won't let go of. The part of your life that you won't let go of, that's what burns. Your memories, your attachments, that's what burns. They burn them all away. But they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul. So the way he sees it, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, then you are going to see devils, demons, terrifying visages tearing your life away. But if you've made peace, then you see that the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth and the attachments. It's just a matter of how you look at it. That's all. So don't worry. Okay? Okay. Same with Kali. It's a matter of how you look at it. Is she terrifying? Is she horrendous and horrible, and or is she a liberating visage to set us free? And this works with whatever it is. It is very easy to look at something and vilify it, whether it's within our own selves or within someone else. But the moment we understand more deeply, oh, choice. It's how I approach this situation. It's how I approach this individual. It's how I approach this systemic injustice. It's how I approach it, not it in and of itself. Angel or demon, it's not about them. They are what they are. But my consciousness is what I see demons, then I'm holding on. I see angels, then I have made my peace. It's how I approach it, how I practice living the presence of God, how I practice principle. Because then it gives me the ability to move and navigate in whatever systems they may be. It gives me the ability to address the Supreme Court justices. It gives me the ability to address political corruption. It gives me the ability to address homomisia. It gives me the ability to address Islamamisia. It gives me the ability to address whatever the circumstances are with greater power and presence, whatever the conditions are with greater love, compassion, and wisdom. As within, so without. Breathe. Very often we are confused and we argue with people, confused and we fight with people. But the moment we pause and understand, sometimes we are seeing the exact same thing, but we are seeing it from different angel, demon. We're seeing the exact same thing. 6 or 9. We're seeing the exact same thing. But because of our vantage point, because of our baggage, because of our consciousness, because of our mental equivalent, we make them wrong and we're right, or vice versa. They're right and we're wrong. But in many instances, we can both be right. We can both be correct. How else do we come to a place of greater understanding, greater equanimity, greater justice, true justice, if we are not willing to pause and reflect and contemplate and look at things differently based upon our consciousness, not a slight, but a greater, more expansive way of approaching and looking at life and living this thing called life. Breathe. We do not see things as they are. We see them as we are, based upon our consciousness, based upon our awareness, based upon our baggage and filters and all of the other things, beliefs, etc. Who we are affects how we see the world. Because two people can see racial injustice, and one becomes so frenzied and angry like Kali that they forget. And in their frenzy, in essence, they end up throwing up their hands. What's the point? or they end up fighting and chasing down every windmill for the dragon that it is. And yet the other person sees the exact same racial injustice. But because they know who they are, they know how to practice living the presence of God. They understand what it means to operate based on principle. They understand what it means to walk the teaching of science of mind and spirit. So they, as a greater beneficial presence to the world, they show up as a 21st century New Thought Good Samaritan, and they change. They vote. They lobby. They write legislatures. They write representatives, or they do whatever it is they need to do. Run for school board. They do whatever they need to do. Create a blog, get the message out. Whatever it is they need to do. They do all of their spiritual practices, yes, and how they show up in the world, in this thing we call the beloved community, a world that works for all. Both and. Thomas Schroeder says, circumstances indicate the sort of power we want, but they do not help us generate it. Rather, they impress us with a sense of something contrary to the power. And therefore, we should endeavor to dwell on the power in itself, and so come into touch with it in its limitless infinitude. Circumstances indicate the sort of power that we want, but they don't help us generate it. What helps us generate power? You are already life living itself. You already have power. So the more you come into understanding what true power is, the more you are able to operate with it and from it truly. And that's when you come into touch with this limitless infinitude. As Marion Woodman says, when the power comes from within us, from the allness that we are, and we claim it as our own, then we no longer have to affirm ourselves by dominating others. There is no need for me to have privilege over others, no need to have supremacy over others. There's no need to dominate. And the irony is that we are actually afraid of our own power. We're afraid of our own power. We're afraid of, because angels and demons. The moment we step into our own power, not only do we surrender, not only do we come to a place of I am at peace, but it means we have to deconstruct and destroy all of the lies. The lies that say you are small, you are weak, you're just a human, you're simply a sinner. We have to destroy and eliminate all of that. And for many of us, because this is the baggage we have carried for so long, we don't know who we are without it. So power, which is free from this, scares us. Knowing who and what you truly are, and that you are the limitless infinitude incarnating as you, terrifies many of us. And yet that is precisely the invitation. Feel the fear and practice anyway. Feel the fear and do what is yours to do anyway. Feel the fear. Feel the fear. Acknowledge it, recognize it. And then ask yourself, what am I to do? What is mine to do? What am I invited to do? What am I called to do? To embody my power, to embody the power. Not a slight degree, but a greater degree. To be at peace with the truth of my being, not attached to the lack and limitation that I have been conditioned to believe about myself, but to truly be free, to truly exclaim the mantra of free at last, thank that which I am free at last, to own our power. And reminding power, when we talk about power, power is the ability to do something, the ability to act in a particular way, to think a particular thought. Shakespeare said, thought is free. It is the ability, the potential, the capacity to do something. And we are reminded that, once again, power in and of itself, but how is it life affirming or is it non-life affirming? Because non-life affirming power or pseudo power, capitalistic greed, driven by the ego, based in lack and scarcity. Got to get mine before there ain't enough to go around. And if that means putting you down so I get my piece of cheese, then I'm going to put you down. It's pseudo power. It's non-life affirming. It's not life supporting. Life affirming power, real power, the power that we are afraid of owning is authentic understanding, authentic recognition, authentic alignment with the divine, the divinity of our being, and using our energy to create, to co-create, to be convicted in the truth of who and what we are, the principles of science of mind and spirit, to create a world that works for all. Breathe. Power. Oftentimes when people think of power, certain images come to mind, and Superman is one of those images that when people think a powerful superhero, Superman. And in the movie, The Man of Steel, Superman's father, Jor-El, says to his son, Kal-El, you will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards, principle. They will race behind you. They will stumble and they will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun, Cal. They will join you in the sun, enlightenment. And in time, you will help them accomplish wonders. Power. But what happens when I tell you that this power isn't simply relegated to Superman, but that this power is your power? It is your truth. And as Jor-El said later in the film, what if a child dreamed of becoming something other than what society had intended or programmed or conditioned them? What if a child aspired to not just this level, but aspired to something greater, such as the truth of their being? That is the invitation we all have. What if you, as the child, imagine and intended to become something other than what society had intended and conditioned you to believe of yourself? What if you aspired to that which is greater? You aspired to practicing, living the presence of God. What if? What if in that you step into the energy of what it means to recreate? Whatever it is you want to recreate, to reimagine whatever it is you want to reimagine. Health, finances, global peace, food for all, whatever it is. What would happen if you stepped into the energy of what it means to re-envision and to reinvent, to be anchored and aligned with principle? What would happen? What if? Destruction in and of itself is not something to be avoided. Destruction is a part of the process of construction. Are we ready to engage in the both and process that enlightenment requires? The same process required to create the beloved community, in other words, a world that works for all. Standing on Shiva is a synonym for standing on the foundation of your divine power, which expresses the truth of your being, God incarnating. Breathe. This week's declaration or affirmation, I will say it first, and if you are in alignment with it, say it with me on the second go round. I wake up to the truth of spirit that I am, and I live that truth aloud. Together. I wake up to the truth of spirit that I am, and I live that truth aloud. And so it is. This week's questions for the Thursday night discussion group, study group. Number one, what is a suffering either in your own life or the larger world that you feel called to help alleviate? Two, what practices can you do or what practices do you do to alleviate suffering, self and others, family members, friends? Number three, how do you demonstrate your authentic power from day to day, moment by moment? How can you stand on Shiva, the destroyer of illusion and the revealer of truth, more consistently? And what practices will support your remembering this truth more deeply? Number five, what can and what will you do today to recreate, to reimagine, to re-envision, to reinvent a world that works for all? And let us pray. Simply anchoring into the truth of our being, this power, this presence, this awareness, this divine oneness, the all that is. Standing on Shiva, standing on the foundation of principle, standing on the foundation of truth. These words are spoken. And as these words are spoken, by standing on the foundation of that which destroys illusion, by standing on that power, then all that is the illusion, you are weak. All that is the illusion, you are so incompetent. All that is illusion fades back into the no thingness from whence it came. No longer having its effect upon me or anyone else. As these words are embodied, then that truth must be embodied. In the same way that Yeshua said, "Get thee behind me, Satan. Get thee behind me, that which is the lie, that which is trying to convince me something that is not my truth. Get thee behind me, because when I place my gaze in that direction, that is where I am going. And when you are behind me, you are not what I am focused upon. You are in the rear view mirror. Get thee behind me, for as I move forward in consciousness, as I move forward in power, as I move forward in equity and justice and liberty and love, as I move forward, anything that is not life affirming, not life sustaining, not life supporting, get thee behind me. I am deeply rooted and anchored in principle, practicing the science of mind and spirit, thought by thought, word by word, feeling and emotion by feeling and emotion, and action by action, breath by breath, moment by moment. It is with gratitude that I state this truth. It is with gratitude that I embody this truth. It is with gratitude that I practice what it means to practice living the very presence of the infinite, which is incarnating itself as me. And what is true about me is true about all. And with this gratitude, I surrender this into the law, knowing that the law, which always says yes, always has my back. It's always present to receive my mental equivalent and to act accordingly, which is why I steward my thoughts, my words, my emotions and feelings, and my actions with mastery. Because the law says yes. And so I refuse to be afraid of my power, to own my power. So it is with confidence, courage, and conviction that I claim my power. I embody my power. And knowing that the law says yes, I live this power out loud, actively, consciously, and divinely. And that is what this prayer is right now. It is done. It is so. It is answered. It is manifesting. And so it is. Namaste. Much love, much blessings, all that good stuff. See you over in Zoom for our final July gathering. Our next gathering will be in August. Dates to be determined. So I will see you soon. Love and appreciation.